Well, look who it is. Welcome back, friendos. I'm ever so glad to see you back here once again today in our medieval city. Quickly becoming a trading empire and/or merchant city-state, as it were, in what I believe is going to be the last episode, at least of this season. I really want to continue this series, and it seems that a lot of you guys do as well, so I think that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Last episode, we had built the walls around the courtyard in the fortification area where we're going to be building the fort and/or mansion and/or stronghold for Rin, Nal, and their little baby. So that is what we're going to begin with today. Of course, though, we are going to need a lot of resources, most importantly stone, for all the walls that we plan on building. Primarily limestone, since it seems to be the most abundant in the region, right next to slate, of course, but I wanted to stand out a little bit from our walls of the city, and especially given the fact that this is going to be the only stone structure in the entire city other than, I believe, our guard outpost that we've currently built, I should say. I want to be able to really tell that this is indeed a fortification and not just a normal old little cabin or building or something of that sort like everything else. However, construction was briefly halted when one of our slaves, Miniton, I believe is how you pronounce it, was attempting to escape through the southern gates. Naturally, we couldn't allow this, so Talia and Clara began rushing in to beat on her and even maybe stab her a little bit, although she was indeed a tough old cat, it would seem. We would eventually take her down, but she had managed to hold out against the two of them barehanded, wearing no armor, simply a dress. For our next season of this series, we're going to need some pretty tough members to go out and, well, I don't want to spoil any of the ideas I have, but I believe that she may have just proven herself useful enough to be part of this new group that we send out. We'll see, though. Now that we've ensured that all of our slaves are no longer escaping and are indeed accounted for, though we don't have all that many anyhow, we could continue our progress in building our fortification. Though, as you well know, this type of construction takes a very long time, and this is as well. So we'll check back in later. I wanted to mention a new mod that I've added, the Trading Spot mod. Though it is a very basic and simple mod, I think that it's going to be absolutely perfect for our market square here in our market district. Essentially, this is just going to be a homing beacon for all of the trade caravans that we get coming in and out of the city. Everything has a place and everything is in its place, or whatever people say. As we were doing all sorts of building, though, one of our elven traders who had stopped in at the market district was actually telling us about a nearby item stash that they had spotted on the road. We would end up sending out a caravan comprised of Giradas, Danielle, and Miniton. This not only might be the perfect opportunity for us to acquire some riches, but also for Miniton to prove herself once more so we can find out if she's truly worthy, especially given her recent antics. From a distance, we could see a fiery smoke bellowing into the clouds above. It would seem that there's some type of barbarian encampment around this item stash. Oh, but I'm afraid it's much worse than that. Not only are they barbarians, but they are orc barbarians. And though it would seem that there are only 3 of them, and 3 of us as well, I'm afraid that orcs tend to be much stronger, and so we are very much outmatched. But even a lowly slave like Miniton had enough courage to stand up against the orcs and to at least try before we tuck tail and run away. Besides, we still have the element of surprise, and as we crept up in the shadows as night began to fall, we devised a plan. Orcs being all brawn and no brain, we thought that if we were to kill their chieftain, the others might begin to flee themselves. But I'm afraid that the chieftain's armor was much better quality than the others, and our arrows simply grazed it and bounced right off. This caused him to go into a fit of rage and charging at us, beating us with his large mace. Of course, we would begin to flee the area, but the orcs began chasing us down, beating on us, and taking down Giradas. But as he writhed on the ground in pain, he was quickly brought back to his feet with nothing but his sheer strength and resolve. Even so, he was badly injured, and the rusted weapons that these barbarians were using could easily cause an infection, so we would need to be very careful and thorough. The arrows from our elven bows barely put a dent or a scratch on their armor, and with all three of them working together, it would be damn near impossible for us to win this. Initially, we were trying to devise some type of plan to maybe sneak into this area, steal their riches, and then run away. But to be honest with you, these orcs were protecting this item stash with their lives, and they are very persistent. So I thought it might be best for us to cut our losses and go back home. Genuinely, it's not worth losing two of our guardsmen and one of our slaves, who could possibly be a guardsman or something important in the future, all over some rubies and emeralds. So sometimes you have to take the L. The journey wasn't a total loss though, as we did find out that Minitin not only has the strength, but it would seem that she may even have the courage that we're looking for. Regardless though, as our heroes begin returning back home, we'll check back in at the city, where it would seem that we finally finished the fortified home of Ren Nowl and the little baby elven boy. Though at the moment we've only got the skeleton of it built, with the downstairs and upstairs, all the flooring and walls being completed, we still require quite a bit of furnishings. Later that night though, Nowl had recalled an encounter, you could say, with a dark scholar who seemed to have some type of twisted scars all over his body. Apparently, the gentleman was sleeping just outside our city walls, Nowl denying him entrance after their incursion. Ren would personally go out to speak with this gentleman, who apparently claimed to be some type of scholar of the dark and unnatural arts with a ability to twist and mutilate flesh into some type of twisted meat. Well, either way, the incident that Nowl was talking about, apparently Flick, the dark scholar here, after being denied entry into the city, decided to punch Nowl, Ren's wife, and as you could imagine, we were none too thrilled about that. Ren, in a rage, attempted to arrest the piece of shit, but he started fighting back, and thus Ren beat him in the head with his mace a couple of times until he went nighty-night. For a situation like this, with some of the scum of the earth, we would normally make an example out of them, and to do so, we would take them in front of the entire city, and we would execute them and hang them up somewhere for everyone to laugh at and to be taught an example from, I suppose you could say. But in this particular case, we're going to make an example out of Flick here by enslaving him and using his ability for our own pleasures, such as turning our enemies into a red fleshy pudding on the ground. But as we're putting the fear of Ren into our new prisoner, we're also going to be working on the furnishings of Ren and Nowl's new fortified home, with that being some nice dining room tables for many of our esteemed guests to eat at, of course, such as the famous merchants who often visit the city, as well as other nation faction leaders. In particular, we have two large dining tables downstairs, just under an overlook upstairs, where Ren and Nowl will be sitting looking down upon all of their guests. Not, of course, because they think they're better than anyone else. It's more of a power move, a psychological thing for getting some business dealings done, I suppose. By this time, the caravan with Geratus, Danielle, and Minitin had finally returned home as well, safe and sound, and luckily no infections from those shitty rusted axes. But one thing is for sure, those orcs are really becoming a problem in this region. We're going to need more forces if we plan on taking them on in the future. Especially as our city and population continues to grow, safety is always going to be our top and number one priority for our citizens and trading partners. Now then, towards the end of the last episode, we were actually working on some armor and uniforms for all of our guardsmen, which we have finally finished up. Just a simple nasal helm for the the ordinary guardsmen, and a few specialized helmets for Danielle and Dial, of course. Now this is a proper company of pikemen, by golly, and just in case you're curious, you may notice that all of our guardsmen now have an apostrophe at the end of their name, and that's simply for convenience sake. That way, when we're getting raided, I'll know who to choose to go out on the front line. Speaking of which, just by the palace, we're also going to be building something of a personal quarters or barracks, I suppose you could call it, though they are going to have their own rooms for some of the palace's personal guard. For now, I think we're going to choose Dankman and Dorsey to go about guarding the palace. Maybe we swap out guards every so often, though. That way they can all enjoy the privilege of guarding Rin now and the baby. I'm sure you'll notice they have some very nice sleeping quarters, as well as a nice place to eat, and also a little campfire out back so that they can cook their own meals while guarding. Now that we can finally ensure that it's going to be properly guarded at all times, day or night, we can finally go about furnishing the inside of the palace itself, adding in some nice shelves full of food and elixirs and wines, as well as a few recreational area that I'm sure our guests and even our citizens will enjoy. We want the palace to be a place for all, or at least the downstairs where people can enjoy while they're sightseeing and things like that. Upstairs you'll notice a war map, that way Rin can also plan out future battles against orcs and possibly some trade routes and things like that with nearby villages and other settlements. To finish off the dining room downstairs though, we would end up making some drapes. Now these are no ordinary drapes, these are actually going to be made out of dare leather, the same dare that we had killed on our legendary hunt as a community and as one people, so it's only fitting that we would all get to enjoy it. Ah yes, a true king and queen of the people, or at least I suppose that's what their title's going to be. If you guys have any other suggestions, I'm always all ears, but for now I think we'll just refer to them as that. Even young lad Arendelle really seemed to enjoy his new home, and I apologize, last episode I was calling him Arendelle, and as I mentioned, I'm not exactly familiar with all the Lord of the Rings films, so I apologize, but it is Arendelle, and I'll try to remember for the future. Now then, we are once again going to be focusing a little bit on our defenses. We're actually going to be creating some rocket-powered arrow barrage machines known as a Hwacha. These should be absolutely perfect for defending our walls against invaders big and small. Realistically, the only thing I really worry about are the orcs. As we saw earlier with Gyarados and the others trying to take down the small encampment of them, if those barbarians were to come here with much larger forces, we may struggle without some new types of weapons such as these. I also noticed that one of our tenants were celebrating their birthday today, and though the place that they decided to celebrate was a little cramped, as you can see, everyone really seemed to enjoy it. Now, I know this doesn't really seem important, but a lot of you are playing along with me here in your own worlds and universes, and I wanted to mention that the Days Matter mod is absolutely perfect for keeping spirits high and also keeping your tenants around by keeping them happy, because they're always celebrating a birthday party or an anniversary party or any type of party for a holiday that you can create. So it's very useful. After we had celebrated some birthdays though and built a few more Hwachas around the city walls, we also started working on a personal project for Nao herself around the palace. This is going to be Nao's own personal flower garden, but of course this is not only for just Nao and Rin and the royalty, I suppose we could call them. This is for everyone who lives in the city, and they can come and adventure these lands, see these beautiful sights, and stop in at our beautiful flower garden. And of course, with the palace and the flower gardens and everything that we're creating, we're hoping that this might attract quite a few tourists who will stop in at our market district as well, and perhaps even some celebrities of these lands, or somebody who has some deep pockets, if you will. It wasn't much, but it was indeed beautiful, and we were quite happy with how it turned out. Nao seemed to enjoy it herself quite a bit as well, well, as it was a nice zen place where she could come, relax, and even pray and meditate for a while. Now that we're finished up with the eastern wing of the palace's district, I suppose we could call it, on the western wing we are actually going to be creating something a little bit different. With a new sectioned off area just left of the palace with a road wrapping all around for ease of movement, of course, we are going to be creating something of a training ground. Now, obviously, our guardsmen tend to spar with one another more often than not, although that can be quite dangerous, and if one of them ends up decapitating the other by accident or otherwise, that is going to leave us with one less guardsman. You'll notice we have many a target, along with several weapon racks for bow and arrows, as well as melee weapons like swords and axes. Want to practice your archery skills to impress the king and queen? Well, have no fear, as you can fire a few off into a few hay bales. Or perhaps you want to practice your thrusting action with your pike. Well, we also have plenty of armored targets as well. After a bit more work on the pathing, adding in some limestone brick roads into our packed dirt pathing that was already there, the palace district is finally finished, at least for the time being, though I think I'm pretty happy with how it turned out so far. Of course, we have our training ground that we just built, as well as our gardens to the east, and we have a little bit of a garden above the palace as well, and I think that this is going to be the perfect place for Now, Rin, and Arendelle. Not only gorgeous, but safe and secure, which is much more important. However, as we finish the construction on our new district, we had some bad news. It would seem that a large group of orcs have entered the area, and something tells me that these filthy green SOBs aren't exactly here to purchase any of our goods or services. Even worse so, it would seem that the same orc chieftain that Sir Geratus had tangled with previously has arrived here as well and is leading this little war band. Thankfully, after they were met with our gigantic city walls though, it seems that they need a little bit more time to plan out their attack. Underprepared and overconfident, just how we like our enemies. This gave us ample time to rush into our new arrow-firing machines, prepping and readying each of them with several barrages. No doubt that this battle is going to take quite a while, I'm sure. Now that we have our trap set, we simply needed some bait. We would have Dorsey stand in the gateway holding it open so it looks like an easy way into the city. And don't look now, friends, because here come the orcs just downriver. Open fire. The orcs seem shocked from our initial ferocity and explosive attacks, but we were glad that it didn't scare them off completely, as we had plenty more where that had come from. As we continued peppering and shredding them, some of them, or at least one of them, managed to make it within inside our walls, but was quickly subdued, as you can see. Alas, not quite as easy taking down humans as you thought it would be, fellas. Well, I'm afraid that you simply lack the intelligence and ingenuity that humans possess. As we continued firing off barrage after barrage, finally, our new green friends were so cowardly that they decided to try to run away, though I could hardly blame them, as about 95% of them were already dead. Unfortunately, though, this did also mean that their chieftain would manage to escape as well. Something tells me we haven't seen the last of him, though. As for his remaining companions, we have seen the last of them, and we made sure of it because we stripped them naked so we could sell their gear and then stuck our swords through their hearts. Well then, that surprisingly went quite well. I must say that we do have to give all the credit essentially to our new vehicles that we're using. Without those and their explosive damage shredding the orcs' bodies, we probably wouldn't have ended that near as quickly, but still, nevertheless, we won. And our home, this region, as well as these lands in general, are now much safer from our victory. In other good news, Arendelle has finally come of age and is able to walk around the place all by himself. The palace now echoes and bellows with the pitter-patter of his little 3-year-old feet. And the boy seems to have even taken quite a liking to dueling, wielding a bone for practice out in the training yard. start. Of course, though, under the careful supervision of Dial and Sir Geratus. Perhaps Dial here shall take the young lad under his wing, as he too had only come to us when he was a mere little youngster. One could almost consider him something of an adopted son between Sir Geratus and Rin and Now, of course. And it is his great pleasure to go about training the next generation just as we had for he. Truly, my friends, since those old days when Dial was just a wee lad, we have come very far, and as has our city, but I feel that there is still a much-needed addition. Yet another district, this time a little bit to the northeast, just above our tanning facility, as well as many of the workers' quarters. Though be it much smaller than our other districts, as a matter of fact, I think it may be the smallest one that we've created for the city thus far, it will be making us a pretty penny of silver. Now, of course, most of this little area is actually going to be storage for our stone blocks and other types of ores, but this is going to be our mining district. And the way that we plan on making money, of course, is by selling many of the natural resources that we are digging from the planet. Almost as if a sign of good fortune from the heavens above, we immediately struck silver ore as we were mining it out. Now that we actually have the mine shaft itself dug out and we have everything out of the way, making it easy to go in and start digging resources, we can actually begin, well, digging up those resources. Now, unfortunately, we can't go about getting iron or gold or silver or anything like that. We can only go about getting coal and salt, but that's not really a problem, as both of these resources are in abundance here in this area, and people are willing to pay a handsome fee for them. As I'm sure you could imagine, most of the factions on this planet like to have war. Well, for war, you need weapons, and for weapons, you need to smelt down other ores, and to do that, you need coal chunks. So that's going to be the first resource that we start mining out. In the meantime, we're also going to go ahead and build a little proper mining camp here. That way, maybe if we have some workers who want some overtime, they can spend some more time in the district overnight, get up bright and early and walk straight into the mines, instead of having to travel halfway across the city. Or perhaps the next time we have an attack by some barbarian orcs, maybe we enslave them and use their strength in our mines to dig up our resources. We'll see. But with that, my friends, our final district of the city is finally completed, and you are finally done hearing me say the word district. Lucky you! Now that all the infrastructure is in place, we can actually finally go about digging up all the coal that we were talking about and mainly focus on doing that instead of all the construction projects throughout this area, which was absolutely perfect because the more and more we got, the more that we could take to our market section of the city and go about selling to some of these elven folk. By this point, many of the elven villages and towns nearby have basically became our main trading partners, and it's wonderful that we have some of these more useful resources like coal that they're always looking for as well, only strengthening our relationships further. That's always why we're willing to make a little trip out to them as well to sell some of our goods. But my friends, we have finally and truly created a bustling little utopia of a medieval city here, a true gem upon the planet, a trading city-state, a merchant city-state, just as we had hoped. But with all this power comes more responsibility, and we can't just be simply known as the Rotten Boar Inn anymore. I mean, look at all we have. No longer will our city be known as the Rotten Boar Inn, but now as the capital of the boar. And we are no longer going to be known as the Rotten Boar Fellowship, but the House of the Rotten Boar. For a fellowship and an inn owner simply takes care of its guests and those who come to stay, but as a true medieval royal house, we are going to be taking care of our city, our region, and everyone within it. When this series first started, I thought it might be fun to do a little medieval overhaul hospitality series that we just build a big city and we make a lot of money, and we did do that, but this series has become and is still becoming much, much more than that. I want you all to know that I've been reading your comments. I've seen that most of you don't want this series to end, and In case I haven't made it clear, and maybe I haven't of course, but this series is not ending here today. It's simply the first season, and that happens a lot with some of my series, but I can promise you that this is only the very beginning. But before we really end this season and this episode at all, there's still one last thing we need to do. There's a little bit of apparel that we need to make for Rin, something that I've been holding off on for quite a while, but I think it's finally time. I think that we have earned it. The next series may be as a monster hunter, maybe even hunting down orcs along with some vicious monsters in the area. I like the sound of that. See you later.